Because Karen Suzunu was overwhelmingly powerful, every ghost stationed to guard the anchor point abandoned their posts and poured out of the cave to besiege her. In their minds, dealing with such a high-ranking Akatsuki member was the surest way to secure the anchor point. They never expected anyone would sneak into the cave while they were distracted. Neji, who had slipped in unnoticed, calmed his racing heart and scanned the grotto with his Byakugan. Before he left, Shinji's orders had been blunt and minimal: a mark on the map and the command to destroy the anchor point. Neither of them had explained what an anchor point actually was. Fortunately, searching was Neji's specialty. He first probed for chakra signatures, but found none anywhere in the cave. Then he searched for unusual constructs and quickly stopped before 5 stone slabs set deep in the chamber. "What are these slabs?" he muttered, turning one over. It looked ordinary. No chakra traces, no inscriptions. The only notable thing was the faint, lingering scent of blood, proof that ghosts had touched them. Having circled the cave twice and found nothing else suspicious, Neji concluded these slabs must be the anchor points Shinji mentioned. Without hesitation, he used gentle fist to shatter all 5 slabs. He pulverized the larger fragments as well, reducing them to dust, and stuffed the remnants into his backpack. A notification chimed in his mind, as if from an unseen interface. An anchor point has been severed. Warning: planar destruction countdown is being reevaluated. Countdown: 4 high above. Shinji hovered inside his perfect Susanoo when the lamp alert sounded. He pulled up the anchor point projection and confirmed what he'd suspected. The severed anchor point was the one in the land of Earth. "Well done," he murmured. Karen and Neji didn't disappoint. 3.5, almost 4 days had passed since the 5 anchor points had appeared. Shinji had thrown everything into delaying the ninja world's destruction. Subtle tricks, overt attacks, misdirection. He'd already neutralized the anchor points in the lands of fire and wind, and now Earth. Only the anchor points in the lands of water and lightning remained, and the clock showed 4 days left. He didn't celebrate. The remaining anchor points were in brutally remote locations, one on a lone island overseas, the other atop a 1,000-mile frozen mountain, and getting there would be slow. 4 days was no guarantee. One small setback could undo all their work. Land of water. A thin fog lay over the sea as a large fishing boat plowed through it. On deck, Haku's face was tight with worry. Like Karen, he served Shinji and knew how crucial this mission was, and how catastrophic failure would be. Even with the Hidden Mist's covert help, finding a captain who knew the island route had taken a full day. "Good thing Lord Shinji had the village help," Haku said under his breath. "Alone, I wouldn't have found this place in time." He exhaled warily. He didn't know that severing 3 anchor points had reset the countdown 3 times. He still believed he had only the final 4 days left. Below deck, Mei Terumi, disguised as a crew member, frowned. "The Akatsuki's test is brutal. 4 days isn't even enough to find that little island." Kisame Hoshigaki nearby grinned. "Then don't worry, we just do our part." Mei shook her head. "Something's off. Without our help, that Yuki kid wouldn't stand a chance. Maybe Akatsuki aren't serious about recruiting him." Kisame only shrugged. "This is the Akatsuki. Every member's a monster. If it were easy to get in, that'd be the real problem." A lookout suddenly shouted from the bow. "Island! I see it!" Haku, Mei, and Kisame all snapped to attention and peered through the fog. A wavering line appeared on the horizon. Without a second thought, Haku launched himself off the side of the fishing boat and skated across the choppy surface toward the hidden island. The crew gasped. Jumping into open sea under heavy fog was almost suicide. Losing direction meant death, even for a ninja. Even the Hidden Mist operatives disguised among the crew were stunned at Haku's boldness. He moved across the water with uncanny speed and control. Both Mei and Kisame, elite jonin in their own right, exchanged surprised looks. "That kid," Mei trailed off, choosing her words, "isn't simple." Kisame chuckled. "Now I see why the Akatsuki took an interest. He's hidden his strength. He's not what the file made him out to be." They'd studied Haku's dossier before the mission, a remnant of the Yuki clan who had awakened an ice-release Kekkei Genkai. But the way he'd moved now suggested far more than the paperwork had shown. The Akatsuki had likely seen potential they hadn't even guessed at. On the island, a lone figure in the guise of a swordsman stood silently watching the sea, a shadow among the rocks as Haku closed in. Through the thin sea mist, White, racing across the surging waves, spotted a blurred figure standing on the shore. "Demon!" he shouted. His face hardened. He could not make out the other's features clearly, but anyone appearing on this remote sea island at this hour could not be an ordinary person. Shinji's words rang in his mind. Remember, there are only 4 days left for the ninja world. And now, less than an hour remained before those 4 days were up. The thought tightened his jaw. The ninja world must not be destroyed on my watch. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was no trace of doubt, only iron resolve. Without holding back, he activated speed, the ninjutsu he had taken from the demon and adapted. In an instant, he tore across the sea with terrifying velocity. The shockwaves from his motion cut through the waves and cleaved the mist. On the island, the stern-faced swordsman watched White approach. Slowly, he drew a long blade from his waist and exhaled a misty breath. If Shinji had been there, he would have recognized him at once, the water pillar of the Demon Slayer Corps, Giyu Tomioka. Cold, almost disdainful, Giyu faced the rushing boy. With a hard push, Giyu launched himself like a cannonball straight at White. His speed was so great that the ground beneath him cracked only after he had already left it, fissures spreading for more than 10 meters. On the fishing boat, everyone froze as the two figures hurtled toward one another. The ordinary crew gaped in stunned silence. Even the hidden mist shinobi hidden among them exchanged unbelieving looks. Kisame, who had earlier remarked on White's talent, went quiet. The boy's speed was simply beyond expectation. Even if Kisame himself were to go all out, he thought, he might only reach something like this. White was only 9 years old and still playing in Konoha's ninja academy. For someone not even a genin to move like this, it confirmed he was a prodigy. Mei Terumi's gaze fixed on the figure rushing from the island. Though the mist clouded her view, she could see the samurai-style garb and the long sword, and he appeared young. She frowned. Is this the test the Akatsuki set up for White? Why does he move so fast? Is he using a ninjutsu I don't know? For a shinobi, speed often decided victory or defeat. Before anyone could answer, the two collided above the sea with a thunderous impact that whipped up a towering wave. Water sprayed, and as if torn into rain, fell back in sheets. Without a word, the two attackers launched into a relentless exchange. Clang, clang, clang. The shallow waters around the island rang with the high metallic staccato of blades striking fast and hard. There was no probing, no preliminaries. The fight skipped straight to full intensity, as if someone had fast-forwarded the battle. The hidden mist shinobi on the boat frowned. Mei and Kisame shared that same confusion. An assessment usually began with discussion. Terms, scope, the test itself. These two were behaving as though one were a mortal enemy. There was no dialogue, only ferocity. Kisame spoke up, calling a few hidden mist jonin to him. Circle the island and investigate from other directions. Yes. The jonin vanished from the deck in a flash. As members of the Hidden Mist Assassination Squad, they were experts in recon, disguise, and infiltration, perfect for quietly scoping out the island without alerting anyone. Look, Mei urged. Kisame followed her gaze to the distant battlefield. Patches of chilling frost were blooming across the sea, and within breaths, a wide swath of the shallow water near the island had frozen. The samurai swordsman, however, showed no sign of fear. Each time his blade flashed, it carried surges of brilliant water that moved as if alive, swirling about him and shattering the encroaching ice. Though they fought on a heaving ocean, both combatants seemed perfectly at home. Suddenly, an ice dragon rose from the sea with a furious roar and surged toward the swordsman. Mei's eyes narrowed. The Yuki clan's ice release hasn't died out. There are successors. Kisame couldn't hide his surprise. This brat. That level of ice release was flawless. Even ninjutsu experts like Mei Terumi and Kisame could not find a flaw in it. A shinobi capable of such mastery of ice, so young, would, if he lived, be a future powerhouse in the ninja world. The swordsman countered by sweeping his blade. Water erupted, coalescing into a massive dragon formed of churning waves. The two colossal beasts surged at each other and collided, unleashing roars that for a moment drowned out even the thunder of the ocean. The ice dragon's chill crept into the water dragon, slowing its movements inch by inch. Meanwhile, the water dragon's force flung ice shards from the ice beast, threatening to shatter it. "Is this what ninja battles are like?" a crewman whispered. "It's terrifying," another said. "He's just a boy." And yet, Kisame spat a laugh. "These aren't ordinary ninja techniques." On the battlefield, Haku gritted his teeth and fought with everything he had. As the duel dragged on, a cold unease grew in him. The swordsman before him was stronger and faster than the demon he'd faced earlier, the one with Upper Moon 6 carved in his eyes. Haku had driven his own speed to the limit and still could only barely keep pace with the man's rhythm. There was another detail that unnerved him. When the swordsman fought, he kept exhaling a thin mist from his mouth. The motion, the sound, the way his breathing changed, it all reminded Haku of Shinji. Shinji's breathing pattern, whenever it quickened in practice, had always given him a noticeable boost in speed and strength. Even so, compared to the swordsman with the wave-like markings across his face, Shinji seemed weak. This man's breathing, speed, and power were on another level. Haku could feel the enemy's chakra draining rapidly, but he knew he likely couldn't outlast him. With a clash of blades and a surge of chakra, Haku's ice dragon and the swordsman's water dragon dissolved together above the sea. Ice shards scattered through the air, and Haku, standing on the churning water, sucked in a ragged breath. Why was his ice release so ineffective against him? After the fight on the Long Street, where he had defeated Duma, the former Upper Moon 5, Haku had taken the ice crystal creation technique from him. The technique had greatly enhanced Haku's ice release bloodline limit. His control was smoother, his power magnified. It was why he could now form an ice dragon with a single hand sign. Before Duma's technique, Haku could still use ice release, but never so fluently or with such strength. Even so, his ice release could gain no advantage over this swordsman. Is he really a demon? Haku wondered. His leader had told him that the strongest demons were organized by the Demon King into the 12 Kazuki, 6 Upper Moon and 6 Lower Moon. Haku had already faced 2 members during the Longstreet battle and had come to understand what it meant to fight an Upper Moon. Yet the cold-faced swordsman before him fought with power that rivaled those Upper Moon, but there was no carved title in his eyes, no blood anywhere on his body. He didn't look like a demon at all. On the fishing boat, a series of whooshes announced the return of the hidden mist Jonin who had gone ashore to scout the island. Mei Terumi called out, "Well, anyone else on the island?" The Jonin shook their heads. "We scouted. There's only that one samurai. No sign of anyone else." "Something's not right," Mei said. Kisame shrugged. "It is odd. For a test the Akatsuki set up, you'd expect an overseer to be here. Maybe they're not on the island. Maybe they're hidden in the sea." Mei frowned. "No, even if it's the Akatsuki, they would need a base in the ocean to observe this. The sea is merciless. No one can stay in those conditions without support. Even a Jinchuriki like the 4th Hokage would have to find shelter quickly. I don't believe their overseer is just floating out there." A Jonin asked, "Captain, what should we do?" Mei hesitated. Their mission had been to help Haku pass the test set by the Akatsuki so he could infiltrate the organization and gather intelligence. If they revealed themselves now and the Akatsuki's overseer was watching, the entire plan would be compromised. Haku would be rejected, and the mission would fail. But standing by might mean Haku's death. Kisame was blunt. "The Yuki kid can't match that samurai. If we wait, the kid will die." Mei nodded. Her assessment matched Kisame's. On the surface, the fight with Giyu Tomioka looked like a stalemate, but any trained eye could see Haku was running out of options while his opponent remained composed. If it went on, Haku would lose. Kisame smiled as he said, "If we don't act, the operation fails and that kid dies. If we act, the outcome's uncertain, but that kid definitely won't die." Mei sighed and made her decision. "Everyone else, stay on the boat and maintain guard. Kisame, you're with me." She leaped from the boat and sprinted across the water toward the distant duel. Kisame followed at once. Seeing them rush in, Haku allowed himself a small, grateful breath. Giyu Tomioka said nothing, but his sword began to move faster and harder. As they closed the distance, Mei formed hand seals and called, "Water release, water dragon bullet." A water dragon exploded up toward the swordsman. Just as Giyu prepared to meet the attack with his blade, he felt the lower half of his body seize with ice. his legs were frozen solid. In that momentary shock, Mei's water dragon crashed into him and sent him sprawling through the air. Using water breathing, he barely adjusted his posture and landed on the sea surface. Before he could recover, Kasame was on him, pushing with both hands. Water release. Water shark bomb jutsu. Giyu swung his sword. Chakra surged along the blade to meet Kasame's jutsu, but when the two forces collided, Giyu realized his technique hadn't cut through the attack. Instead, the opponent's ninjutsu absorbed his chakra and rebounded with twice the force. A tremendous explosion rocked the sea, and a towering spray burst upward. Kisame grinned as the water thundered. Mei scanned the horizon anxiously. Still no sign of an Akatsuki overseer. In their eyes, the samurai had been struck by repeated ninjutsu strikes and should be finished. It seemed the battle was over. Only Haku, who suspected the true nature of the swordsman, would not let his guard down. He watched the roiling waves with a hard, steady gaze, knowing full well that such an assault could not truly kill a demon, if this man was one at all. The sea breeze, carrying shards of flying ice, slowly blew the mist away. On the restless water, Haku, Mei Terumi, and Kisame stood, each wearing a different expression. Mei and Kisame had at first thought the mysterious samurai was finished, but when they saw Haku's solemn face, their instincts as experienced shinobi kicked in. They both turned toward the spot where the samurai had fallen. Confusion crossed Mei's features. A grim look settled on Kisame's. The waves calmed, and a figure broke the surface. Mei's pupils narrowed. The look on her face was plain curiosity, and more than curiosity. In the ninja world, samurai occupy an odd, precarious place. Samurai clans can command the allegiance of a nation, but they are far smaller and less powerful than the ninja. Even exceptionally talented samurai are generally dismissed by ninja as not bad. The ceiling for samurai power is assumed to be fixed. One or two geniuses might stand out, but they won't upset the balance and threaten the villages. This samurai was different. His movement and speed rivaled those of elite jonin, yet he wielded a sword technique that used chakra. From observation, Mei realized in alarm that he could produce a water-release jutsu, akin to a B-rank water dragon, simply by swinging his sword without forming hand seals. In other words, his sword style replaced hand seals to activate powerful ninjutsu. If that technique were ever spread, the status of samurai would change forever. Kisame worried about the immediate danger. The fact that the man had taken a direct hit from his water shark bullet jutsu and kept fighting meant he could not be underestimated. The samurai, Giyu Tomioka, kept his impassive expression. After casually glancing at Haku, Mei, and Kisame, he shifted his stance, activated his breathing method to the extreme, and slashed at Haku. Caught off guard, Haku raised his left hand and used the fine steel kunai he carried to parry the blade. His right hand moved into hand seals, and he expelled ice release. Metal rang on metal. A chorus of cracking sounds rolled across the sea. From the water sprang countless ice mirrors, each chilling the air, only to be cut through by streaks of sword light. Sensing Haku was near collapse, Kisame formed seals with both hands and slammed them onto the sea. 1,000 feeding sharks. A torrent of sharks erupted from the water and surged at Giyu. The samurai paused a fraction, then met the assault with a sweeping stroke. Haku stole the moment to catch his breath and instinctively prepared to use ice release to back Kisame up. Then Shinji's orders flashed in his mind. He found himself watching the massed sharks encircle Giyu and thought, there isn't much time. Destroying the anchor points is the key. Without hesitation, Haku abandoned direct confrontation and pushed his exhausted body toward the nearest island. Mei and Kisame stared in surprise, but, faced with a formidable opponent, quickly suppressed their questions and continued to pin Giyu down. Haku landed on the small island after several leaps, breathing hard as he sketched the terrain at a glance. The island was small, his eyes fixed on a 10-meter-high boulder. He sprinted for it. Beneath the rock, a low man-made cave hid in shadow. He was about to slip inside when a sudden gust of displaced air warned him. He rolled aside just as Giyu's blade sliced through the space he'd vacated. Mei and Kisame soon followed onto the island. Seeing Haku and the samurai behaving strangely, Mei could no longer contain herself. What's going on? Haku kept it short. We have to defeat him. He couldn't tell them the full truth. Terms like anchor points and other world were too dangerous to mention, and he feared that any deeper explanation might cause panic or worse, cause the samurai to blurt something highly contaminating. To his relief, Giyu merely twirled his sword and said coolly, "I accept your challenge." Mei and Kisame exchanged stunned looks. They had expected resistance, but not this. The samurai showed no suspicion about being surrounded and accepted the fight calmly, even arrogantly. Both were high-ranking jonin of the Hidden Mist and important figures in the ninja world. The samurai's composure grated on them. Kisame snorted, "I don't care why, he dies." Mei nodded, planning to question Haku after the fight. Haku, inwardly relieved that Giyu hadn't given anything away, steeled himself. "Act!" At Mei's command, the three renewed their assault. Explosions rolled across the island as their techniques collided with Giyu's swordwork. A moment later, the smoke cleared. Mei, Kisame, and Haku staggered back, disheveled and solemn. In the center of the clearing smoke stood Giyu Tomioka, blade still in hand, his face as unreadable as before. "Who is this guy?" Mei demanded. Kisame's face was dark. "Our ninjutsu doesn't affect him. He seems to have an immortal body," Mei added, "and he can see through my water-release decoys." After several exchanges, Mei and Kisame, relying on their analytical instincts, had independently pieced together the samurai's abilities without any explanation from Haku. First update is here? Land of Lightning. Kimimaro, dust-streaked from the long trek, trudged up across an endless snowfield. The climate here was cruel and unforgiving, so inhospitable that even many ninja avoided it, leaving the region sparsely populated for hundreds of miles. A dozen miles behind him, Yakushi Kabuto moved cautiously, scanning the white horizon. He knew more about the Akatsuki than most. He had been Orochimaru's right hand, and Orochimaru had once been inside the organization and had met its leader, the bearer of the Eye of the Sage. Pulling his cloak tighter, Kabuto wondered aloud, what kind of examination would the Akatsuki hold out in a place like this? He didn't think it strange that the Akatsuki would choose a desolate site. In fact, the organization's reputation for terror made him expect something few could pass, or even understand. He pushed his glasses up and muttered, "Please, don't let the proctor be Uchiha Itachi." If there was anyone he feared in Akatsuki, it was Itachi. He had witnessed Orochimaru's failed ambush on Itachi and had seen how easily Itachi subdued Orochimaru with a single genjutsu. Even someone as powerful as Orochimaru couldn't stand against the Sharingan. Kabuto hated the thought of facing that kind of power. Ahead, Kimimaro reached the summit and then suddenly froze, as if he'd noticed something. Kabuto crouched behind a wind-bent tree and narrowed his eyes. The proctor was likely somewhere near the peak. Who could it be? During Orochimaru's defection, Akatsuki had changed. A number of powerful figures had surfaced, known names like Moryo and Shino, and 3 mysterious S-class criminals temporarily labeled A, B, and C by the 5 great nations. Who was running this test was anyone's guess. A blast sounded from the summit. A dark speck hurtled down and crashed into the snow. Kabuto's breath caught. The falling shape was Kimimaro. He hesitated, then another figure flashed down from the peak. The Akatsuki examiner has appeared, he thought, and then froze. The newcomer wasn't wearing the Akatsuki cloak at all, but a black haori and carried a long sword. A samurai? Kabuto breathed. He squinted and thought he could make out markings in the newcomer's eyes, but the distance was too great, and he had no dojutsu of his own to read them. The two who had descended began to fight on the snowy crest. Kabuto's face darkened. He knew Kimimaro's strength better than anyone. At 9 years old, Kimimaro already fought like a jonin. If he unleashed his Shikotsumyaku, his corpse-bone pulse, he could probably overwhelm an ordinary jonin. Kimimaro's specialty was taijutsu, and Kabuto would never want to spar with him. So when the haori-clad swordsman dominated Kimimaro in both speed and power, Kabuto was stunned. Kimimaro unleashed his corpse-bone pulse. Bones tore from his body and whistled like missiles over the snow. The samurai met them with ease, parrying every bone projectile with a single long blade. His movements were composed, precise, utterly memorable. Before Kabuto could fully register it, the samurai flashed in close and cut Kimimaro cleanly with one strike. Kabuto no longer cared about concealment. He sprang into action, hurling 2 kunai rigged with explosive tags to cover his approach. With his other hand, he dragged the bloodied Kimimaro away and began to retreat. The samurai didn't bother to look toward them. He chopped the incoming kunai into fragments. The explosives attached to the kunai detonated from the shock, producing a massive blast. The explosion bought them time. Kabuto managed to pull Kimimaro clear of the swordsman and crouched to check his wounds. The cuts were deep, but Kimimaro's bone techniques had spared his vital organs. The bones shielded him from fatal damage. Kabuto set to work treating the wounds. "Can you move?" Kabuto asked. Kimimaro tried to stand and shook his head. "I'm okay," he said hoarsely. "Who was that?" Kabuto asked. Kimimaro frowned. "I don't know. He was just standing on the summit when I got there. Then he attacked." "An Akatsuki examiner?" Kabuto probed. "I'm not sure." Kimimaro paused, catching his breath. "But he's strong. I've never fought anyone like him." Kabuto knew that when Kimimaro emphasized someone's strength, it was no casual claim. The dust cleared from the blast, and a figure stepped slowly out of the smoke. Kabuto stared, and then his expression went icily still. Now he could see the markings in the man's eyes. One eye bore the characters Upper Moon, the other read 1. "Upper Moon 1, Kabuto whispered, the words tasting like ice. He understood the implications immediately. There were members within the Akatsuki whose eyes bore the Upper Moon mark. Elite fighters, each as powerful as a Jonin at least. In a previous conflict, the Upper Moon group had fought other Akatsuki members. Even the weakest among them was said to be on par with Mangekyo-level Sharingan. Upper Moon 5 and 6 had once matched a Mangekyo Uchiha. If that was Upper Moon 1, his strength would far exceed Jonin, likely at Kage level. Facing such a foe, Kabuto felt the ground fall away beneath him. He had no confidence at all. Whoosh! Shinji dispelled his Susanoo and dropped from the sky, landing lightly on the crest of a snow-covered peak. He scanned the horizon, estimating time and distance in his head as the cold wind howled and his red cloud cloak snapped loudly. A small, dark speck appeared on the far skyline and closed in fast. Shinji lowered his gaze and smiled. No doubt about it, the dot resolved into a figure. Yugito Ni, the Jinchuriki who had just destroyed an anchor point in the Land of Fire a few days before. At the time, Shinji hadn't expected to be able to control Yugito. After she had severed the anchor point in the Land of Fire, his last order to the rampaging Two-Tails had been to head for the anchor point in the Land of Lightning. His thinking had been ruthlessly simple. If it worked, fine. If not, she had already done him a favor. He'd chosen the lightning route for a reason. The other anchor points were well staffed. He had trusted operatives like Haku and Karen to handle them. The lightning anchor point, however, had been left to Kimimaro, who didn't know the full truth. Orochimaru might or might not take interest in Kimimaro's recruitment into Akatsuki. Either way, that path appeared the weakest of the five. Yugito arrived beside him and stood at attention. Shinji checked quickly and confirmed that she remained under his genjutsu. A quiet admiration escaped him. "The Sharingan's sway over tailed beasts is stronger than I thought," he murmured. He'd been prepared to lose Yugito during the rampage. She had been close to breaking free, but the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan he had projected through Jibi had finally reined her in. In retrospect, it wasn't entirely surprising. Even Obito, with a single Mangekyo, once manipulated the Nine Tails and caused the Nine Tails disturbance in Konoha. Shinji, though he hadn't yet integrated white Zetsu cells, possessed a full pair of eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and his yin-release chakra alone exceeded what Obito had wielded. Even with the distance, controlling the Two Tails was within reach. Shinji checked his map. He was still 100 kilometers from the lightning anchor point and didn't intend to keep using his perfect Susanoo to travel. Its speed was incredible. He'd crossed from the wind's deserts to these frozen peaks in a day or two, but it devoured Dojutsu chakra at an obscene rate. The toll on his eyes and vision had already shown, swollen sockets and a blur at the edges. He needed to recover his dojutsu strength soon. Otherwise, by the time he reached the anchor point, he'd be a useless corpse. The snowy reaches here changed distances. 100 kilometers meant picking your way over jagged peaks and into a cold that sapped stamina. If he walked, his Sharingan might recuperate, but he was only 8 years old. He wouldn't have the endurance. As he worried, Yugito stood by him, and an idea sparked in his mind. At the lightning anchor point, the figure of Upper Moon One cut a chilling silhouette as he stood among the drifting smoke. Yakushi Kabuto's heart sank. He couldn't help but wonder if this whole recruitment had been a trap, if Akatsuki had known Kimimaro was Orochimaru's mole in Konoha and used the mission to draw Orochimaru out. Kimimaro was still a child, a prodigy, talented, with the deadly corpse bone pulse, but only 9 years old. Was it necessary to send someone as fearsome as Upper Moon One to evaluate him? A cold sweat ran down Kabuto's temple. The snow didn't make him shiver. Nothing made him shiver now, except the certainty that the other side didn't intend to let them walk away. Kimimaro struggled to rise. Kabuto's medical ninjutsu, coupled with Kimimaro's unique bloodline, had already healed wounds that would have been crippling to ordinary shinobi. Kabuto kept treating him and hissed softly, "This mission's compromised. Prepare to retreat." Kimimaro shook his head. "Can't you see?" he said, voice flat. "They won't let us leave." Before Kabuto could answer, Upper Moon One charged again, sword sweeping. Kimimaro met him with bone blades, and the clash rang across the ridge, metal against bone, creating a hard, ringing percussion. Kabuto made the decision he'd feared. He sent an encoded report, the message that Akatsuki might be laying a trap, then bit his finger, formed signs, and thrust his palm to the ground, summoning jutsu. A pillar of white-blue smoke erupted, and a colossal brown snake burst from it, a creature only slightly smaller than Ryuchi Cave's Manda. Its bulk thundered, generating a roar as it lunged at Upper Moon One. Kabuto bounded onto the snake's head, mind racing. Upper Moon One forced Kimimaro back with a furious swing, then leaped up and cleaved at the snake. Kabuto watched, stunned. Charging a massive summon in a straight-on assault, this was reckless. As the sword descended, it flashed with a searing brilliance so harsh it stung the eyes. Kabuto's instincts screamed, and he dodged at once. The flaming blade bit into the snake, splitting it from brow to tail. The creature collapsed, huge ribs exposed, spiraling blood spraying across the white snow. Kabuto landed hard and stared. "How is that possible?" he breathed. A summoning beast, when mortally wounded, usually dispels itself. Even the toughest summons could rarely be killed outright. They vanished instead, avoiding fatal damage. This snake had taken a clean, fatal stroke, clear evidence it had been killed instantly. A summoned corpse could not dispel itself. Kimimaro, too, stood frozen. He'd watched Upper Moon One closely and seen no hand signs, yet the attacker had produced an attack like fire release without the usual chakra rituals. Was it taijutsu? A secret technique? A bloodline limit? Upper Moon One sheathed his sword and turned his cold gaze back to Kimimaro and Kabuto. The two of them felt the weight of his stare. In the earlier exchanges, Kimimaro had burned everything he had, corpse bone pulse, the 8 gates he'd only recently unlocked. It was the only reason he'd held up at all against Upper Moon One's brutal swordsmanship. Kabuto's grin was tight and wry. The battle resumed. Upper Moon One fought like a machine, emotionless, calculating, every strike the most efficient solution. Kimimaro and Kabuto found themselves impressed in spite of the danger. This was the style of someone hardened by countless battles, someone truly worthy of Akatsuki's name. Under assault, Kimimaro changed. Close to death, he refined himself. Fear did not break him, but sharpened him. Although the wounds mounted, his reflexes and decisions grew faster and surer, the kind of growth Kabuto watched with a mixture of pride and dread. Still, their progress barely closed the gulf. Only one thing kept them in the fight. Upper Moon One's chakra was clearly slipping as the conflict dragged on. It seemed at first super abundantly charged, but then that supply visibly waned, an almost tangible depletion. Kabuto's frown deepened as he pieced it together. A normal shinobi could not begin a battle with such an enormous chakra reserve without means of long-term sustenance. Upper Moon One looked like he was drawing down a finite reservoir inside himself. If that was so, then as his chakra bled out, his speed and power would ebb. Perhaps their odds rose with every passing minute. A flash of steel cut his thought. Upper Moon One had darted behind Kimimaro and left a great wound. Blood spouted hot and bright. Kabuto's training told him at once. That was enough to kill a normal shinobi. Even with Kimimaro's corpse bone pulse and abnormal constitution, the blood loss was crippling. Without Kimimaro holding the line, Kabuto feared he could not endure much longer. He breathed out a curse, feeling the fragile hope waver. Upper Moon 1 advanced, then abruptly stopped and turned his attention to the distance. Kabuto followed the line of his gaze and swallowed. Perched on a high cliff, framed against the gray sky, stood a figure in the Akatsuki's black cloak with red clouds. The cloak snapped in the wind. The figure looked down on the scene like a god surveying a battlefield. "My wife is ill, and I've been busy all day, so I won't be able to write today. I'm sorry." "It's him!" Yakushi Kabuto's face went rigid, the surprise draining out of it and leaving only despair. One Upper Moon 1 had already been more than enough to handle him and Kimimaro. Now another Mangekyo Sharingan user had appeared. Worse, the newcomer was A, the Akatsuki's most enigmatic member. "Kimimaro, it looks like we can't get away." Kabuto forced a bitter smile. The heavily wounded Kimimaro looked at him, his eyes asking without words. Kabuto understood. "Don't worry," he said. "I've already sent a report on our situation. Lord Orochimaru won't walk into their trap." Relief flickered through Kimimaro's expression, and his face returned to its usual indifference. He didn't begrudge Orochimaru for not coming. If anything, he felt a prick of guilt for almost letting Orochimaru be lured into this. His own life or death barely mattered. As the two braced for the end, Upper Moon 1 suddenly shifted his focus. His form blurred, and he lunged toward the figure standing on the mountaintop, looking down on the battlefield like a god. "What's going on?" Both Kabuto and Kimimaro froze. Kabuto's mind raced back to a report Orochimaru had obtained at the Five Kage Summit while posing as an Otogakure agent, the report on the Battle of Longstreet. That battle, its cause and outcome both mysterious, had been suspected to be an internal Akatsuki conflict between two factions. An Upper Moon member with characters engraved in his eyes and a hooded, masked Akatsuki operative. Could it be? A flicker of hope flared in Kabuto's chest. Upper Moon. One didn't care about Kabuto's thoughts. In the snowy plain, he moved like a charging tiger, a sonic roar announcing his speed as he closed on the masked figure at the peak. The man on the cliff, who surveyed the scene from above, was far less composed than he appeared. His masked face registered genuine surprise. The moment he saw who was charging him, he realized Upper Moon 1 was none other than Tanjiro Kamado, the protagonist blessed by fate from the Demon Slayer world. But this Tanjiro was no longer bright and cheerful. His face was dark, and the character's Upper Moon 1 glowed in his pupils. Shinji's expression hardened. Another righteous figure from the Demon Slayer world had been turned into a demon, and an Upper Moon demon at that. This wasn't like Kyojuro Rengoku's fall. Before anyone could speak, Tanjiro had already leapt, sword raised to cleave Shinji and the mountaintop in half. Kabuto and Kimimaro below watched, astonished. Tanjiro fought without hand seals or ninjutsu, relying solely on his swordplay, a true samurai's style, and they could not have imagined a swordsman possessing such overwhelming strength. Just as it seemed Tanjiro would slice the masked man and the cliff apart, a massive shape erupted from behind the ridge and barreled into Upper Moon 1. A thunderous roar shook the mountaintop. Kabuto threw up his hand against the turbulent wind and whirling snow, and peering through his fingers, gaped. The colossal figure that had intercepted the strike was a blazing, eerie blue, the perfect Susanoo of the two tails, Matatabi. Despite its titanic size, it moved with uncanny agility, blocking Tanjiro's mountain-splitting strike as if it were nothing. Kabuto hesitated, then his horror sharpened when he noticed the two tails' eyes. They were shaped like a Sharingan. The recognition hit him hard. Everyone in the Shinobi world knew Yugito ni, Kumogakure's two-tails Jinchuriki, had become a perfect Jinchuriki. When Yugito was captured, hope of her survival had been slim. A perfect Jinchuriki was nearly immune to ordinary genjutsu, so most assumed the Akatsuki would kill her. Yet here she was, Yugito's two-tails form, apparently controlled by genjutsu and manipulated like a puppet by the Akatsuki. In the blink of an eye, Yugito in her two-tails form and Upper Moon 1 were locked in a furious clash. The whole battlefield trembled. The snow on the slope began to give way as if an avalanche was about to thunder down. Kabuto and Kimimaro's eyes kept darting back to the cliff, where A, the masked Akatsuki, stood calmly watching. The sight left them stunned and uneasy, the method used to turn a perfect Jinchuriki into a puppet, and the collected calm with which he treated a monster like Upper Moon 1 made A seem almost superhuman. On the cliff, Shinji's masked face was grave. Demonized Tanjiro's strength exceeded even Kyojuro Rengoku's. There was no doubt Tanjiro had mastered sun-breathing, activated his demon-slaying markings, and seen the transparent world. Even without outside aid like the Lantern Bearers or cross-world power, Tanjiro's abilities had reached the pinnacle of the Demon Slayer realm. Shinji, by contrast, was far from well. His entanglement with Tsunade's team and his fight with Rengoku had drained a large portion of his chakra. He had then used the perfect Susanoo to travel, which had sapped his dojutsu power. Several days without proper rest had left his stamina frayed, so while he appeared composed as he watched the battle unfold, he was close to breaking. Fortunately for him, Yugito's Two Tails was at his disposal, a solution for the moment that saved him from having to overdraw his dojutsu and fight to the death. He drew himself inward, quietly recuperating his ocular energy while studying the battlefield. He glanced down at the badly injured Kimimaro and Kabuto. Orochimaru had not made an appearance. Whatever trailing he had done, it hadn't been close. First update delivered. Shinji regretted not luring Orochimaru to the Land of Light in his vision. Orochimaru, versed in countless secret arts and sealing techniques with unmatched experience, was the best candidate to deal with creatures like the tailed beasts. He had assigned Kimimaro to the anchor point in the Land of Lightning precisely because he expected Orochimaru to be there. Instead, only Kimimaro and Yakushi Kabuto had shown up. Neither of them were weak by the ninja world standards. It was just that one was still young and the other had not yet mastered Sage Mode. Their strength and experience hadn't reached their peaks. At best, they were Jonin-level warriors, enough to handle ordinary demons, but hopeless against a demonized Upper Moon one. In fact, the fact they had survived as long as they had already exceeded Shinji's expectations. Scanning the battlefield again, Shinji realized the demon guarding this anchor point appeared to be only Tanjiro. Upper Moon one indeed had the qualification to stand guard alone. His face did not brighten. If anything, it darkened. Of the 5 anchor points, the 3 in the Land of Fire, Wind, and Earth had been severed. Only Lightning and the distant Water Point remained. Among the demons who had appeared were demonized Tanjiro, Kokushibo, Narame, suspected Upper Moon, and demonized Kyojuro Rengoku. Shinji still didn't know who had been posted at the Land of Earth Point, but since Karen and Neji had handled it, he assumed the guard there wasn't top tier. The Upper Moons, who might not yet have shown themselves, included 3 through 6. And then there was the Lantern Bearer from the Demon Slayer world, suspected to be the Demon King. Shinji was most wary of that Lantern Bearer. If the Lantern Bearer hadn't appeared here, he very likely had shown up at the anchor point in the Land of Water. Bai's sighed. The thought made him twitch inwardly. Despite his anxiety, Shinji remained on the cliff, calm and still. He recovered his dojutsu and watched the fighting below without acting rashly. On the field, the battle between Yugito Nii and Tanjiro raged on, merciless and absolute. Yugito, fully transformed into her tailed beast, had teetered on the edge of berserk from the opening clash. Every blow carried the raw, terrifying power of a tailed beast. Demonized Tanjiro, as Upper Moon 1, returned no quarter either. His swordsmanship was flawless, and his eyes seemed able to perceive chakra, making his strikes as lethal as the beast's rending claws. But as the fight dragged on, Shinji and the 2 Jonin not far from the scene, Kabuto and Kimimaro, began to notice weaknesses. Tanjiro's breathing techniques reached speeds even Shinji's eternal Mangekyo Sharingan found difficult to track. But the destructive power of the breathing method had limits. Demons could not match a tailed beast's sheer chakra reserves or its regenerative output. Each of Tanjiro's precise slashes opened deep cuts in Yugito's flesh, yet wrapped in a tailed beast chakra cloak, Yugito's wounds healed in an instant. The injuries were little more than fleeting red lines to her. Kimimaro frowned. He had been pushed to the brink by Tanjiro earlier and found his current performance puzzling. Kabuto observed coldly, "Has Upper Moon 1 never fought a tailed beast before? All this effort, without sealing techniques, it's pointless." Shinji allowed himself a small, private thrill. The demons had no good way of dealing with monsters that possessed vastly greater chakra and superior regenerative ability. But his relief was tinged with a melancholy clarity. Even if demonized Tanjiro's strength touched the upper limits of the Demon Slayer world, facing a true monster like a tailed beast, he was impotent. That was the world's limitation. The Demon Slayer world had no tailed beasts, so neither its demons nor its swordsmen had experience against such terror. Just as many ninja had been unprepared for demons' unique regenerative powers when they first met them, demons now found themselves at a loss against tailed beasts. Shinji narrowed his eyes. Tanjiro had first fought Kimimaro and Kabuto hard, and then thrown himself into a continuous, punishing duel with Yugito. His chakra was depleted, his speed and strength had dropped back toward baseline. Without chakra amplification, he was clearly no match for a near-berserk Yugito. In short order, he was shoved into the snow by one of the beast's massive paws. It's over, Kabuto and Kimimaro both thought. Then lines of swordlight flashed, streaking, precise and sudden, slicing open the giant claw that had pinned Yugito to the ground. The tailed beast yelped in pain and rolled away. Tanjiro burst from the snow, drawing on the last of his chakra. He ignited into a blazing radiance and charged straight at the cliff where Shinji stood. Leaping high, he exhaled a misty breath. His blade erupted in a brilliant, searing flare like a miniature sun. Both Kabuto and Kimimaro held their breath. They knew this had to be Upper Moon One's ultimate attack. Everything burned to make one final strike at the figure who had been watching them coolly from the cliff all along. Can he do it? Kimimaro murmured, his gaze hard. Kabuto clenched his fist, drawn in despite himself. They had no right to care about the duel between the Akatsuki's mysterious A and Upper Moon One, but the scale of the clash and the raw, arresting brilliance of Tanjiro's swordsmanship had seized their attention. As Tanjiro's blade descended toward the cliff-top figure, a black flame bloomed out of nowhere and swept over him in silence. The brilliant fire along his blade guttered and dimmed inside that black conflagration. Tanjiro, his flaming aura and all, was swallowed by the dark blaze. Watching Upper Moon, one charged toward the high cliff and then fall from the sky, swallowed by a mysterious black flame, Yakushi, Kabuto, and Kimimaro felt a tangle of awe and dread. They had seen the Upper Moon's strength firsthand. His lethal swordsmanship, monstrous speed, and inhuman power had left them both deeply impressed. So seeing that same terrifying fighter rendered helpless by A, the one who wielded the Mangekyo Sharingan and stood calmly on the cliff the whole time, filled them with a cold, unmistakable fear. Kabuto muttered, "Is this the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan?" Kimimaro's eyes flickered. At last he understood why Orochimaru had been obsessed with the Uchiha's Mangekyo. Below the cliff, Tanjiro, engulfed in black flames, rose from the snow. He leaned on his sword, staring up at the ledge. The flames still licked his body, his haori hung in rags, and his skin was scorched, as if a demon had crawled up from the underworld. On the cliff, Shinji frowned. Even Tanjiro, a wielder of sun-breathing, was not immune to Amaterasu. But unlike other demons who turned to ash the moment the black fire touched them, this Upper Moon displayed an extraordinary resistance, his body regenerating beneath the blaze. Kabuto's gaze sharpened. With his knowledge of medical ninjutsu, he recognized the terrifying recovery the flames could not halt. This regeneration far surpassed ordinary ninja limits, perhaps even exceeded the legends of the first Hokage. He could only think, incredulous, what kind of monsters are these Upper Moons of the Akatsuki? Tanjiro, still scorched, lifted his long sword and struck the ground again and again. One blow, then another, a third, and a fourth. The mountain answered with a deep, rumbling groan. In breaths, the pristine snow of the range heaved and shifted, centered on Tanjiro's position. It's an avalanche. Upper Moon One is trying to escape by triggering the avalanche. Kabuto reacted instantly, scooping up the more gravelly injured Kimimaro and turning to flee. But neither of them could outrun the wall of snow. Before they could get far, they were swallowed by the cataclysm, buried without time to resist. Tanjiro submerged right away in the white surge. Even with the eternal Mangekyo's perception, Shinji could not tell where the avalanche had swept him. Because Shinji stood on a high cliff, the avalanche barely affected him. He watched the spreading white below, then flickered and moved toward the anchor points. Yugito-ni had been swept down the slope too, but in her tailed beast form, she withstood the torrent. After a few powerful bounds, she rejoined him. Shinji reached another summit and found 5 stone slabs arranged on the ground. No demon guards stood watch. He didn't risk approaching. Instead, he activated Susanoo and from a distance shattered the slabs. Successfully severed an anchor point. Warning, plane destruction countdown is being re-evaluated. Countdown 10. The lantern bearer's prompt rang in his ears. 10 days. Relief flooded him. Severing this 4th anchor point in the Land of Lightning had greatly reduced the anchor network's pressure on their plane, extending the countdown to 10 days. Enough time, Shinji thought, to move on to the Land of Water and deal with the last anchor point. He glanced back at where the avalanche had run out. A veil of snow mist still shrouded the area, masking Tanjiro's whereabouts. It was a pity, but acceptable. His priority was to cut the anchors that were pinning the ninja world and then uncover whatever designs the lantern bearer might have. This Demon Slayer contact clearly had aims beyond simply destroying the ninja world. He wouldn't gamble on a direct pursuit. As for Kabuto and Kimimaro, buried in the avalanche, they could only hope for survival. With a roar, the blue-flamed Matatabi form of Yugito Ni returned to Shinji's side. He vaulted onto her back and activated Susanoo, using its skeletal form so he could ride safely despite the tailed beast's eerie blue flames. It consumed his dojutsu to do so, but the skeleton Susanoo made traveling far easier than maintaining the full form. "Go, Land of Water," he ordered, then closed his eyes to rest. Matatabi bounded from peak to peak. Land of Water, Sea Island. Explosions shattered the small island, leaving it pocked with craters. 3 figures stumbled out of the smoke and collapsed onto the ground. Haku, Mei Terumi, and Kasame, each torn and exhausted from the clash with water pillar Giyu Tomioka. Haku's clothes were shredded. Mei and Kasame bore multiple cuts and bruises. A sudden sea breeze cleared the dust, revealing Giyu. Half his body had been blown away. He leaned on his sword with one hand, barely upright. Seeing Giyu Tomioka, the water pillar, restore his severed half and stand again, Mei Terumi screamed, "Damn it, what is this guy?" Kasame's face went dark. The enemy's chakra had been exhausted, and their raw combat power was no longer a threat, but an apparently immortal body that refused to die made the situation unbearably awkward. "We can only seal him," Mei decided. Kasame nodded and flashed a hand sign meant only for his partner. Mei glanced at him and quietly shifted her stance. Kasame's signal was simple. Mei would draw the target's attention so Kasame could set up a water prison. If they could trap him that way, performing a sealing jutsu would be far easier. The target was simply too fast to hit with a sealing technique directly. With a single shared glance, their plan was set, and they moved as one. Mei dodged forward, forming seals as she shouted, "Lava release, melting apparition technique." A viscous spout of acidic lava spewed from her mouth and slashed toward Giyu. He'd already felt that attack once, to the cost of an arm, so he didn't meet it head-on. Instead, he stepped aside, raised his sword, and slashed at Mei's flank. Mei finished another set of hand seals and spat a wave of water release. The water shoved Giyu, making him stagger, and just as he tried to press the attack, he sensed movement behind him. He turned to see 2 figures of Kasame charging in sequence. Expecting a standard clone technique, Giyu thrust his sword at the first figure and lunged for the second, preparing a follow-up slash. He'd seen water clone technique before. Like the shadow clone, it could fool even powerful eye-based bloodline limits, so the extra Kasame didn't surprise him. But when his blade struck the first Kasame, the feedback was wrong. His heart tightened. The one in front was the real Kasame. The one behind was a clone. The real Kasame smiled, a feral twist on his already altered features, and wrenched Giyu's sword from him. At the same time, the lagging water clone finished its seals and thrust a hand toward Giyu. Water release, water prison technique. A globe of water erupted and sealed around Giyu. "We've got him!" Mei and Haku breathed, relief flooding their faces. Completely enclosed in a water prison, even someone elusive would struggle to escape. No matter how strange his body, a seal could now be prepared. Inside the prison, however, Giyu moved. He made a smooth draw and exhaled softly. 6th form, whirlpool twist. His body began to spin like a top. The currents inside the prison whipped and bucked, and something strange happened. The water started to show signs of breaking free from Kasame's chakra. Kasame's eyes widened. How is this possible? He had never seen anyone disrupt his own water prison from within. May's hands began to form seals, instinctively. In her experience, the prisoner would break out if nothing was done. Then, crack. A sharp, glassy sound cut through the air. The water that constituted Kasame's prison began to freeze, fast and bright. As the prison solidified, Giyu's spinning was halted. His body stiffened and turned into a block of ice within the sphere. May spun to see who had intervened and found Haku standing a short distance away. He had used ice release at that critical moment to freeze Kasame's water prison. Kasame stared at him with equal parts surprise and a newly dawning respect. Freezing a water release created and controlled by his own chakra was no small feat. Haku's control of chakra was now clearly at the level of an elite jonin. May stepped forward, examining the frozen form of Giyu. "We finally caught him," she said. Kasame came close and looked the ice over. "What do we do with him? He's likely an Akatsuki member. If we bring him back alive to the fourth, they won't blame us for the mission's failure." May paused, urgency returning to her voice. "There could be more Akatsuki nearby. We shouldn't linger. Let's take him straight back to the village." Kasame nodded. Haku, breathing hard, fell into step with them. He had heard May and Kasame's plan, and his chest tightened. As Shinji's servant, he knew demons could taint a place. If this demon's identity reached the hidden mist, contamination might spread. He had no strength to oppose May and Kasame, though. They were simply too powerful. He swallowed his misgivings and followed. A thin beam of light cut through the mist and landed on Haku. For a moment he froze, then a small, grateful smile appeared. "Dawn," he murmured. They had been fighting so long they'd lost track of time. With the first morning rays, the island brightened, and May and Kisame, standing over the ice block, paused to feel the sun's warmth after the night's struggle. Then Haku and May both flinched. The frozen form inside the ice began to smoke and smolder. May and Kisame leapt back, eyes wide. Giyu, encased in ice, started to burn. The sunlight fell on him and the ice around him, and instead of melting, the frozen block cracked, and the man inside began to char, turning to ash even while still trapped in ice. May and Kisame watched, horrified and helpless, as the once-living figure in the ice crumbled into cold ash under the morning sun. What's going on?" May Terumi hesitated, then stepped closer to the large block of ice. Inside, all that remained were a few smoldering ashes and a long sword, its metal already pitted and corroding under the sunlight. "Is it the sun?" she wondered aloud. Kisame narrowed his eyes, uncertain. While they were distracted by that strange sight, Haku had slipped over to the giant rock and quietly smashed the 5 stone slabs hidden within it. "Did I make it?" he breathed, relief washing over him. No matter how much time had passed, the destruction of the ninja world had not occurred, so he must have succeeded. May and Kasame, full of questions, searched the small island. Finding no one else suspicious, they escorted Haku back to their fishing boat. "The Akatsuki's assessment this time is very odd," May said aboard the boat. "I'm worried they have other motives." Haku, who knew the truth, said nothing. Kasame watched him for a moment, then suggested, "The mission failed. It might be dangerous for you to go back to Konoha. Why don't you come to the village with us?" Haku shook his head. "I don't think I've been exposed yet." "Don't be so complacent." May's voice was stern. "The Akatsuki can't be judged by common sense. Their arrangement here must mean something deeper. And that samurai on the island, his strength was unreal and his body seemed immortal. Where did the Akatsuki find someone like that?" Kisame's eyes lit up with a sudden idea. "Could that thing have been created by the Akatsuki?" May blinked, then frowned. "You mean the samurai was some humanoid weapon the Akatsuki made?" Kisame looked at Haku. "Think about it. On one hand, they recruit people and test them. On the other, maybe they test their own manufactured weapons under real conditions. 2 birds with 1 stone. These monsters are too twisted," May muttered, but she didn't dismiss the idea. Given what the Akatsuki had already done, even ambushing the 4th Raikage, she could believe they were capable of this. If that was the case, Haku returning alive would probably mean he'd passed their assessment. Haku only managed a surprised, silent look. He hadn't expected May and Kisame to spin so many possibilities. Land of Fire. Swish, swish, figures poured out of the dark, oppressive primeval forest. They were the same united forces who had entered that forest days before, but now their numbers were smaller. Finally out, several of them sighed as the sunlight hit their faces. The fourth Raikage slammed his fist into the ground with a boom, carving a crater, his face full of anger and frustration. The Cloud Ninjas clustered around him, grim-faced. Guided by Yugito Ni's chakra, the United Forces had not only failed to free Yugito Ni, they had fallen into a trap set by the Akatsuki. Fortunately, the United Forces had enough strength to break out. "Upper Moon 2, someone cursed. Kakashi stood apart, frowning. He wasn't as resigned as the others. He had a nagging suspicion that the group branded Upper Moon might not actually be Akatsuki. His reasoning wasn't simple. The first time the Upper Moon had appeared during the Longstreet battle, two of them, Upper Moon 5 and Upper Moon 6, had been wearing the Akatsuki's red cloud cloaks. But was that conclusive proof? In that battle, the Upper Moon group had clearly been targeting other Akatsuki members. Now, the United Forces had been lured by Yugito Ni's chakra and seemed to have walked into an Akatsuki trap. But if the Upper Moon group weren't allied with the Akatsuki, another theory made sense. The Akatsuki intentionally baited the United Forces into Upper Moon territory, using them as a convenient weapon. The clue was in the battle itself. Apart from Upper Moon 2 acting openly and a mysterious, powerful figure hidden in the shadows using space-time ninjutsu, no other Akatsuki members made an appearance. If this had truly been a carefully orchestrated Akatsuki ambush, their absence was strange. Chiyo of Sunagakure stepped over to Jiraiya. "We can't let the Raikage run wild," she said. "We have to pull back now." Jiraiya nodded reluctantly. In fact, the United Forces had already escaped the Infinite Castle days earlier. But when they emerged, they found the cave containing the anchor points, destroyed by Yugito Ni's tailed beast ball. That was why the fourth Raikage had demanded they scour the primeval forest for Yugito's whereabouts. Days of searching had turned up nothing. That, too, troubled Kakashi. Yugito Ni, under Akatsuki control, had unleashed a tailed beast ball on a stronghold that had clearly been Upper Moon territory. If the Upper Moon were part of the Akatsuki, why would the Akatsuki attack their own place? The leaders of the four villages, Chiyo, Jiraiya, Kitsuchi of Iwagakure, and Zabuza of the Hidden Mist, pressed the Raikage, and under their combined pressure, he relented. The United Forces prepared to withdraw. Land of Water. Shinji rode atop the two tails, moving fast under the morning sun. Then the lamp notification chimed in his ear. One anchor point has been successfully severed. All 5 anchor points have been successfully severed. World destruction countdown stopped. Congratulations. Shinji had been considering how to deal with the Lantern Bearer from the Demon Slayer world, who should have been guarding the anchor point in the Land of Water, when the lamp's alerts stunned him into silence. He pulled the tailed beast, transformed Yugito Ni to a halt, and stared, incredulous. "It's over?" Even though the lamp confirmed it, he could hardly believe a world-ending crisis had been averted. He stared toward the Land of Water and whispered, "Did Haku succeed?" He knew Haku had been followed by Mei Terumi and Kisame of the Hidden Mist, and that the Land of Water's anchor point should have been guarded by a lantern bearer from the Demon Slayer world, almost certainly the new Demon King. Haku with Mei and Kisame alone shouldn't have been able to handle that. The only plausible explanation was that the mysterious lantern bearer hadn't appeared at any of the anchor points at all. So that's how it is. The surprise in Shinji's face settled into something far grimmer. When he had first met Kyojuro Rengoku in the Land of Wind, he had already formed a suspicion. He knew the Flame Hashira. Kyojuro was an exceptionally righteous swordsman. If this crisis had been nothing more than the final, senseless self-destruction of the Demon Slayer world's so-called Lantern Bearer, someone with Kyojuro's character would never have joined in. There was only one thing that could drive a man like Kyojuro to become a demon and tear apart another world: salvation. Only a desperate attempt to save the Demon Slayer world could push those swordsmen to invade the ninja world. That must be what the other Lantern Bearer was after, some way to escape the Overlord. Whether it was the earlier incursion or these 5 anchor points now, they were all attempts to reach across worlds. Shinji's expression darkened as he unraveled the pattern. From the tactics employed, The enemy was deliberately trying to close the distance between the Demon Slayer world and the ninja world, even using anchor points to pin locations and risk forcing the two realms to overlap and possibly destroy one another. No spoils detected, the lamp intoned. Rescanning. No spoils detected. The device chimed again. Shinji blinked, then understood. If the lamp hadn't detected any spoils of war, it meant Tanjiro, the Upper Moon One who'd been struck by his Amaterasu and buried by an avalanche, hadn't died. As for Kyojuro Rengoku, taken out at the anchor point in the Land of Wind a few days before, his lack of a drop could be due to time or distance, or because he simply hadn't left anything behind. The lamp continued. Reward settlement in progress. Rating, SS. Obtained, Ninja World Endowment. Shinji had barely registered the rewards when a sudden clamor rose behind him. He turned, annoyed. Of course, Cloud Shinobi. Riding the two tails across the Land of Lightning had been impossible to hide from Kumogakure. The village had quickly mobilized and shadowed him. Earlier, he'd been too occupied with the anchor point in the Land of Water to care. Now that crisis had been settled, ostentatious behavior no longer suited him. He flicked his dujutsu and forced Yugito Ni out of her tailed beast form. They stifled their chakra and slipped silently into the nearby forest. On a high peak in the Land of Fire, another scene unfolded. A figure in a haori stood at the cliff's edge, a lamp hanging from his waist. Kokushibo, Upper Moon 2, landed and bowed to him. Nakime, cradling her biwa, followed and bowed. Moments later, the hulking demon who had become Upper Moon 5 and Kaigaku, Upper Moon 6, arrived and fell prostrate at the figure's feet, eyes downcast. Then another shape cut through the sky. He was badly burned, scorched wounds streaking his body that, impossibly, had not healed. This was Tanjiro, Upper Moon 1, who had escaped Shinji's Amaterasu in the avalanche. But Tanjiro did not bow or prostrate. He simply walked to one side. Kokushibo glanced at him and frowned. The others were too slow, he said. The man with the lamp shook his head. No need to wait. They couldn't make it. Kokushibo froze. Nakime tilted her head. Kaigaku and the giant demon were stunned. Only Tanjiro appeared indifferent, as if he hadn't heard. After a moment, Kokushibo's voice hardened. Those damned swordsmen, there's no way they would die so easily. With their strength, it doesn't make sense. Kokushibo disliked Kyojuro Rengoku and Giyu Tomioka, but he could not deny their caliber. Both had pushed their breathing styles to the extreme. Even demonified, their power could rival the Upper Moons, even threaten Kokushibo himself. For newly minted Upper Moons 5 and 6 to have fallen, if that was truly the case, there should be an explanation beyond simple death in battle. The lamp-bearing figure's voice was low. Perhaps they didn't fight with everything they had, but they did meet formidable opponents. Kokushibo fell silent. The figure scanned the line of demons and let out a faint sigh. My opponent still hasn't revealed himself. Heads bowed. My apologies, Kokushibo said. Nakime inclined her head. Kaigaku and the giant demon sank lower in their prostration. The man with the lamp was the Demon Slayer world's mysterious lantern-bearer. His plan, placing 5 anchor points, had been meant to force the ninja world's lantern-bearer to appear, using mutual destruction as bait. He'd intended to test the depth of the ninja world's strength through his subordinate forces. But the result had been disappointing. Against his elaborate arrangements, the ninja world had countered with startling economy. He had expected the Akatsuki, or their equivalent, to throw everything at this attack. Instead, the opponent had only deployed 2 members to break his move, while he had used nearly all of his own. The disparity made him grimly aware. The ninja world's foundations were far stronger than their own. Kokushibo offered another view. My lord, the enemy must have tapped into the resources of the 5 great shinobi countries. A cunning approach, the lantern-bearer said. He looked down. If we can't locate him soon, our plan will unravel. The lantern-bearer had been misled by earlier reports from Lower Moon demons who'd infiltrated the Hidden Rain village. Those reports had led him to believe the ninja world's lantern-bearer was Pain, leader of Akatsuki. That fear had shaped his strategy. Split the enemy by opening 5 anchor points, force their leader to show himself, then encircle him. What he hadn't realized was that the whole narrative had been manufactured, part of a smokescreen created by Shinji to conceal himself. And the real lantern-bearer of the ninja world had been active right under his nose. Why then hadn't the Ninja World lantern bearer used the lamp's power? Because Shinji was only a junior lantern bearer. He had not mastered the lamp's deeper abilities at all. The misdirection had worked precisely because the Demi-Slayer lantern bearer believed himself pitted against a far more centralized opponent. Konoha Village. Shinji, back from his hurried return, replaced the shadow clone that had been covering for him the past few days and then simply sank onto his bed. Only now did his heart truly find rest. When he opened his eyes again, it was already night. He stretched, walked slowly to the window, and looked out at the brightly lit street. A clear smile spread across his face. Laughter and cheerful voices filled the avenue. Vendors hawked their wares, couples strolled arm in arm, children chased each other between the stalls, diners savored their meals, and neighbors chatted on porches. The street thrummed with easy harmony. No one here knew that the ninja world had just survived a life-or-death crisis in the last few days. No one knew it was Shinji who had run across worlds to sever 5 anchor points and stop that destruction. He didn't need their praise to be content. Whether anyone knew or thanked him didn't matter. He smiled simply because he could. His stomach rumbled. He laughed softly, put on a coat, went downstairs, found a barbecue place, and treated himself. Afterwards, he wandered the streets, enjoying a rare moment of peace while checking the lantern bearer's notification that had followed him home. Reward settlement in progress. Received gifts from the ninja world: chakra massive, natural energy affinity, large, S-rank ninjutsu, random, yin release chakra quality improvement, significant. Please select one. An SS evaluation allowed him to pick one gift from the ninja world, plus a random bonus. Shinji found an empty bench, propped his chin on his hand, and thought it through. He hadn't walked away with plunder from a battlefield this time, but because he had severed those anchor points, he'd earned an unprecedented rating, and the rewards were unprecedented as well. Massive chakra, a large boost to natural energy affinity, an S-rank ninjutsu, or a significant improvement to the quality of his yin release chakra. Any of them would be useful. He felt the weight of the choice. Chakra was tempting, but he could always extract chakra with Magatsu when needed. That made the chakra option the lowest priority. The S-rank ninjutsu was risky. Random selection could give him something useless or even detrimental. He crossed that off too. That left natural energy affinity, which would greatly increase his odds of cultivating Sage Mode, and the yin release chakra improvement, which would raise the quality of his yin chakra. Framed against his long-term goals, the choice became clearer. Shinji's ambitions stretched far beyond immediate power. He wanted the Rinnegan to climb to 6 paths level and ultimately to reach the bloodline encirclement that promised a kind of immortality and the ability to travel between worlds. Sage Mode would boost his combat strength, but much of that overlapped with the power he already drew from his eternal Manjikyo Sharingan. Susanoo, especially, filled gaps in his taijutsu and ninjutsu. What he lacked most was a higher quality yin release chakra, something closer to Indra Otsutsuki's, which might be the deciding factor in evolving the Rinnegan. The Rinnegan is the foundation, he said to himself. Only with it can I touch the power of all things and aim for the 6 paths. Everything else is icing. He made his choice and selected the yin release chakra quality improvement. The change was immediate. For a moment his focus slipped, and his spiritual energy flowed outward like a tide, spreading and binding him to the world around him. Plants, the bench, the air, all felt briefly like extensions of his body. The sensation was beautiful and strange. Then it ebbed. His breathing stuttered as a flitting, fetal-like pressure shimmered behind his eyes. His vision went completely black. He didn't panic. He concentrated, letting the sensation settle. Slowly his sight came back, and it was sharper. Shinji realized his vision had improved dramatically. He already had a pair of eternal Manjikyo Sharingan, and his sight had been among the best in the ninja world. That this felt like an upgrade meant his dojutsu had been enhanced along with the yin chakra. He stared at his hands, adjusting to the new clarity running through him, feeling an unaccountable surge of confidence. He let out a small, satisfied laugh. No wonder Sasuke gets so smug every time his dojutsu improves, he thought. This power filling your whole body, that's addictive. A confirmation blinked in his mind. First update delivered. Back at his apartment, Shinji was still riding the high of his dojutsu's sudden improvement. The leap felt almost as great as the one he'd achieved when he painstakingly fused his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Even so, he could tell there was room left in that eternal Mangekyo. Proof, if any were needed, that a pair of eternal Mangekyo Sharingan alone didn't meet half the requirements to awaken the Rinnegan. No wonder, he thought, that in 1,000 years of the ninja world, only Uchiha Madara ever awakened the Rinnegan. The world had produced countless geniuses, but awakening the Rinnegan demanded not just a pair of eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. It also required exceptionally high-quality yin chakra, the kind that comes from an Indra Otsuki reincarnation. In any generation, only the Indra reincarnation could possibly supply the right conditions. Other Uchihas, even if fortunate enough to fuse two eternal Mangekyo, typically stopped there. Shinji couldn't be certain whether the quality of his current yin chakra had reached that level, but if it hadn't, the gap was small. Random merit points, 100 points. Total merit points calculating. Total merit points, 179 points. After his body finished accepting the ninja world's boon, the voice of the lamp chimed again to announce the random reward. 179 merit points, huh? Shinji exhaled, then spoke to the lamp. I choose to upgrade my authority. Promoting to Lantern Bearer requires 100 merit points. Do you confirm? I confirm, Shinji said without hesitation. Authority upgrading. Congratulations, you have been promoted to Lantern Bearer. From now on, you can summon Lamp to actively detect spatial rifts and perform planar traversal. The number of your servants has increased to 4. You can clear localized pollution by consuming Ember. Merit points calculating. Your remaining merit points are 79 points. Shinji stared at the list for a long moment, sorting the implications. Upgrading to the Lantern Bearer rank wasn't just a title. He truly became a Lantern Bearer in the sense of a realm guardian. Before, his ability to traverse planes had been passive. He could only cross planes if a spatial rift happened to appear near the ninja world, like it had on his previous trip. Now, he could summon the lamp to actively scan for rifts and initiate planar traversal himself. That opened up countless possibilities. He flicked his wrist and summoned the lamp. He'd seen it once before during the hurried traversal and never had the chance to study it. The lamp's appearance hadn't changed, a small vessel with faintly glowing golden sand inside. The sand filled only about 1/5 of the lamp's capacity. That must be the ember, he murmured. He tried to activate the golden sand. The lamp responded. He could manipulate the ember, but his current authority allowed it only for clearing pollution. Not much, but useful. He raised the lamp and let its light bathe the village, testing whether there was any pollution to be seen. In an instant, the whole of Konoha was lit by the lamp's beam. Where the light touched, clusters of black mist flared into view, patches of corruption conspicuous and ugly against the village. Shinji, standing at the window, felt his face grow serious. It's this bad already? From the spread he could see inside Konoha, at least dozens of people were tainted, and that was just the village. Across the entire ninja world, the number of polluted individuals had to be far, far greater. He let out a long breath. Given how often the Demon Slayer world's incursions had occurred and how shadowed the invasions were by that Demon Slayer world lantern bearer he'd encountered earlier, it made sense. Shinji's authority had been too limited before. He had handled immediate problems but couldn't wipe the pollution clean. If left unchecked, that corruption would continue to draw the ninja world ever closer to the other world. Lamp, assess. If this pollution continues, how much time does the ninja world have left? He asked. Assessing. Based on the current growth rate of pollution, the ninja world will collide with the other world after 78 years. 78 years! Shinji blinked. Then, oddly, he felt a wave of relief. Troublesome as the pollution was, it wasn't an immediate death sentence. 78 years gave him time to grow. Of course, the Demon Slayer Lantern Bearer might take further steps that would accelerate things. The lamp's projection assumed the current rate. Still, it was an actionable time span. He hesitated, looking back at the ember in the lamp. He remembered information gathered during the previous traversal. Ember could help a plane stave off collapse in a crisis. The burly man's plane had been struck directly by an overlord, but the overlord hadn't fully invaded until the burly man's lamp had run out of ember. Ember could literally buy a world precious time. That made it far too valuable to squander on partial cleansings while the Demon Slayer Lantern Bearer remained active and the pollution kept returning. Shinji canceled the lamp's summoning and set it aside. For now, clearing every bit of pollution across the ninja world with finite ember was pointless. Better to conserve it for a true emergency. His mind turned to the new servant slots. The Lantern Bearer promotion had increased his servant capacity from 2 to 4, 2 additional slots to recruit allies. Who should he bring in? He ran down possibilities and kept circling back to one name, Neji. Neji's potential was still the great unknown. If Neji could awaken the Tenseigan, his power would be enormous. If he couldn't, he would at best be an elite Jonin, maybe barely Kage level. Shinji rubbed his temple and sighed. Recruiting servants would be crucial. He needed to choose carefully. For the moment, he had time, 78 years, perhaps more, to prepare. He would watch, train, and wait for the right moment to expand his strength. They were at a barbecue restaurant when Choji, mouthful of meat, muffled out, "Naruto, is it true? Were you really kidnapped by the Akatsuki?" Everyone at the table stopped mid-bite. The other students from the Ninja Academy set down their chopsticks and turned to stare at Naruto, who was still chewing in oversized mouthfuls. Although they were all still academy students, most came from long-standing ninja families, some from bloodline limit clans, others from lineages known for secret techniques, so rumors and inside information flowed freely among them. Naruto's abduction by the Akatsuki was still a village secret, unknown to ordinary townsfolk, but many of these students had heard snippets. Hearing Choji's question only drew more attention. Naruto scratched his head. "Why's everyone looking at me like that?" Fine. It's true." Sakura leaned forward, curious. "I heard the Akatsuki are all S-rank fugitives. Why would they take you?" "How should I know?" Naruto pouted. He liked attention, but being kidnapped was embarrassing, and he didn't really understand what had happened until after he was rescued and brought back to the village. Shion, who until then hadn't had a chance to speak, suddenly raised her hand. I know. All eyes swung to her. She crossed her arms and put on an air of mystery. The Akatsuki took Naruto because of a tailed beast. She dropped the phrase like a punchline. "This is top secret from the 5 Kaji Summit. I'm only telling you guys." Faces around the table shifted. Rumors about Naruto and a fox demon had circulated for years. Some said he was the son of a fox, others that a demon fox lived inside him. Even if they didn't fully understand what a tailed beast was, many made the connection. A few simply looked confused. Lee, bewildered, asked, "Tailed beast? What's that? Is that what's to do with Naruto?" Shion hesitated, the confident act evaporating. "A tailed beast is, She trailed off, suddenly realizing she didn't actually know the details. Tenten snorted, amused. "You don't know, do you?" Of course I know, but it's all classified. I can't tell you." Shion protested, settling back with a huff. The supposed secrecy from the 5 Kage Summit was mostly a pretense. Shion just wanted to show off. Sasuke snorted and swept the room with a cold look. "Tailed beasts aren't something you need to understand. Don't worry your heads about it." Sakura and Ino instantly lit up, starry-eyed. Shikamaru, leaning back, asked, "Sasuke, I heard you were involved in the rescue. You were the one who brought Naruto back, weren't you?" Sasuke's mouth curved into a faint, self-satisfied smile as he nodded. His gaze flicked, almost unconsciously, toward Shinji, Kimimaro, and Neji, 3 others at the table who had also returned quietly to the village. Not just Naruto and Sasuke were here. Shinji, Kimimaro, Neji, Haku, and Karin had all slipped back into Konoha in secret over the past few days. They were attending this gathering partly to cover their covert returns. When they'd snuck out of the village a few days earlier, those backing them had arranged cover, temporary replacements, and the like. But Naruto's abduction, happening inside the village, had prompted strict internal scrutiny in Konoha. To avoid drawing suspicion, the returned members had to show themselves publicly. Otherwise, freshly back and vulnerable, none of them would have risked coming to a group dinner. Their caution was not unfounded. 2 Anbu were posted in a room next door, watching through a partition wall. The village had extended its surveillance to Naruto's classmates. After all, whoever abducted Naruto clearly knew his routines. That made it likely there was an informant close to him. Sakura pressed, "Sasuke, tell us how you got him back." The smugness fell from Sasuke's face, and he shook his head. "There's nothing to tell." "Wow, just as expected, Sasuke," Sakura breathed, adoring. Sasuke ignored the flattery and addressed Shinji, who was quietly focused on his own plate. "Shinji, I need to talk to you later." Shinji looked up. "About what?" Sasuke's expression darkened. "The Sharingan." The name hit the table like cold water. Kimimara's face tightened. He felt an old hurt at the mention of the Sharingan, though any physical wounds had long since been repaired thanks to his corpse bone pulse and Kabuto Yakushi's medical ninjutsu. What stung now was memory. On his trip to the Land of Lightning, he had watched the power of an Upper Moon One unfold and had seen just how helpless such a being could be against someone called A. The experience had shaken his view of the Sharingan. Neji, too, was affected. During the mission in the Land of Earth, he had seen Karen manifest an almost complete, towering Susanoo and had been stunned. He couldn't imagine how the Hyuga's gentle fist could stand against an opponent wielding such ocular techniques, and he sat in a daze as he chewed, the memory refusing to let go. Karen, tucked in a corner, ate quietly. During the battle in the Land of Earth, she'd been forced back by swarming demons and had feared for a moment, but once Neji destroyed the anchor points, the demons scattered. She returned to the cave, activated Susanoo, and leveled it. Then she changed out of her Akatsuki cloak in a secluded spot, found the grass village squad that had been waiting for her, and slipped back to Konoha. Haku smiled slightly as he sat back. He had taken over a dozen wounds on that trip and didn't possess Kimimara's hardy constitution. Without Karen's emergency treatment, he might have been left exposed. Still, he had no regrets. The ninja world had been saved, and no cost had felt too great. Shinji, watching the exchange and the shifting expressions around him, stayed calm. He finished his barbecue in silence, listening as the others lingered over questions they couldn't quite answer. Shinji was still weighing whether to fill the 2 extra servant slots. After thinking it over, he decided only Neji might be suitable. Sasuke, Kimimaro, Naruto, and the others either lacked the strength to face demons or their loyalty couldn't be guaranteed. Too risky. "We'll wait and see," he decided. He quietly shook his head. He would make a final call about offering Neji a servant slot after Neji's cell fusion experiment produced more results. Being one of his servants wasn't an easy job. If someone wasn't strong enough, they could die at any time. Choji piped up at the table. "Is the Akatsuki really that powerful?" Shikamaru scoffed. "It takes the 5 great shinobi countries to deal with them. That should tell you how much of a pain they are." "I saw them," Kiba said, voice still edged with fear. "If you meet them, don't try to fight, just run," Sasuke sniffed. "Humph, I'll definitely surpass them." Neji clenched his fists at the mention of the Akatsuki operative they'd encountered in the Land of Earth, codenamed B. Tenten noticed and asked quietly, "Neji, what's wrong?" "I'm fine," Neji said, forcing calm. Kimimaro, who had been brooding over memories of A and an Upper Moon One, lost patience with the dull dinner and stood. "I have something to do. I'm leaving." "Kimimaro, the dinner's not over," Shion protested. Yakumo Kurama leaned in and murmured, "Don't mind him. He's been training non-stop. Something's pushed him." Neji also stood. "Sorry, I have something to take care of. I'm leaving too." Tenten grabbed Lee and they followed Neji out. Seeing the youngsters stir, Shikamaru sighed. "The geniuses are all at it. Looks like we can't be slackers either. Let's train." Heedful of warnings from their elders back home, Choji, Ino, Kiba, Shino, and the others rose one by one. Soon only Sasuke's, Naruto, and Sakura's group, Shinji with Haku and Karen, and Shion, who'd organized the dinner, remained in the private room along with Yakumo Kurama. Shion rested her chin on her hands, bored. It was such a hassle to get everyone together for dinner. "Do you think everyone has as much free time as you?" Yakumo shot back. Shinji set down his chopsticks. "I'm done. Thanks for the meal, Shion." Haku and Karen stood at once. The old ninja academy groupings had persisted. The teams were comfortable with each other, and they all nursed a quiet, competitive itch. Shion pouted, and Shinji smiled before leaving the restaurant. Sasuke hurried out after him. After sending Haku and Karen ahead to the training ground, Shinji and Sasuke strolled along the street in silence. After a while, Sasuke broke it. "Shinji," he said, "I know you envy me for the Sharingan, but a simple 3-tomoe Sharingan doesn't change anything. Compared to a Manjikyo, I can't even fight back." "Oh," Shinji replied. Sasuke clenched his fist. "I felt that helplessness again. The one who kidnapped Naruto was a Mangekyo user in the Akatsuki called A. I don't know why he took Naruto. He didn't seem all that serious about it. Naruto was only saved by luck." "Ah!" Shinji was taken aback. He wasn't sure who'd labeled them with those code names. "You can't imagine how strong A is," Sasuke went on, getting louder. "His Susanoo is unstoppable. Even that bastard Itachi would be outmatched." Shinji muttered to himself, surprised by how highly Sasuke seemed to rate him, almost as if he thought Shinji might even rival Itachi. Sasuke's voice dropped and grew colder. He unconsciously slid into his Sharingan. "You don't get what I mean," Sasuke said. "You'd better awaken your Sharingan fast and become a useful Uchiha. Otherwise—" "Otherwise what?" Shinji asked. "To get revenge, I can abandon everything," Sasuke said without flinching. "That includes you. If you can't keep up, I will mercilessly get rid of you." Sasuke glared fiercely, then turned and walked away. Shinji stood there a moment, processing the words. Was Sasuke threatening him? The thought was ridiculous. Then he smiled to himself. Sasuke had just talked about killing loved ones to awaken the Mangekyo, an extreme measure. If he truly intended to do that, he wouldn't announce it. If he had no intention, he wouldn't lay it on so thick. In other words, the threat was pressure, not a plan. Sasuke wanted to force Shinji to wake his own Sharingan sooner. The thought gave Shinji a surprising sense of relief. In fact, he privately hoped Sasuke would be ruthless enough to awaken the Mangekyo by any means, because once Sasuke had a Mangekyo, Shinji could use Uchiha Fugaku's Mangekyo to help Sasuke gain eternal Mangekyo earlier than in the original timeline. That would be like recreating an Uchiha Madara, and a path to gaining the Rinnegan might follow. Meanwhile, Sasuke scowled to himself. "There's no way I can get the Mangekyo the way that guy suggested," he muttered. "There has to be another way." The venue was the same, the faces were the same, but the mood at the Five Kage summit had turned grim. Even the famously short-tempered Fourth Raikage sat quietly. The united forces, the elite contingent sent by the 5 great Shinobi countries, had returned not with victory, but with disaster. They had come away empty-handed and with heavy losses. From the Hidden Mist team, only Zabuza had survived. The rest had been killed. The result was sobering. The 3rd Tsuchikage, who had often hoped to see Kumogakure embarrassed, could not help but fall into a deeper, darker silence. The name Upper Moon 2 had been enough to put the 5 great shinobi nations on edge. Seeing the tension, the 3rd Hokage called the meeting to order. The 3rd Tsuchikage swept a glance over the assembled leaders and asked bluntly, "Is this Upper Moon 2 from Akatsuki really that dangerous?" The commanders who had participated in the joint operation exchanged looks, and Kakashi stepped forward. "He's very dangerous," he said. "By our estimate, even if a team prepared specifically for him, it would take at least 4 to 8 jonin to subdue him." Kakashi's words set off a ripple of murmurs through the lower-tier delegations. 4 to 8 jonin, by itself, meant Upper Moon 2 was not simply a powerful jonin, but someone at Kage level in terms of threat. And that was only one Upper Moon 2. The Akatsuki's roster already included an Upper Moon 6. There were at least 6 Upper Moon members, and there was still an Upper Moon 1 who had not yet appeared. If Upper Moon 2 was effectively a Kage-class combatant, the combined force of the Upper Moons would be terrifying. No wonder the smaller villages were alarmed. The 3rd Tsuchikage pressed on. "Did you get any intelligence about the one who controls space-time ninjutsu?" Kakashi shook his head. "I'm afraid not." The Tsuchikage's face hardened. While the smaller villages worried over the immediate threat, the 5 Kage's greater fear was that mysterious Akatsuki member who could manipulate space and time. Upper Moon 2 was terrifying, but he could be countered with numbers and preparation. The 5 nations could marshal a dozen or more jonin without difficulty. The space-time specialist was different. His very existence introduced unpredictable variables, exactly as the operation had shown. The united forces outmatched Upper Moon 2 in numbers and overall strength, Yet because of the stranger's space-time technique, the allied teams had been isolated and destroyed one by one. The Akatsuki may be stronger than we thought, the third Hokage said after a pause. He added, gravely, and on the very night our joint forces departed, Akatsuki's A infiltrated Konoha and abducted the nine-tailed Jinchuriki. What? The other Kage snapped to attention. The third Hokage held up his hands to calm them. Do not panic. Through Konoha's efforts, we were able to rescue the nine-tailed Jinchuriki. The fourth Mizukage narrowed his eyes. They're clearly after the tailed beasts. If the abduction of Kumo's two tails hadn't been definitive proof of the Akatsuki's intent, the kidnapping attempt on the nine tails left no doubt. The other Kage fell silent, thinking through the implications. In each village, the tailed beasts were not only powerful weapons, but also symbols and guarantees of security. The Mizukage himself was a three-tails Jinchuriki, so the Akatsuki's focus on tailed beasts was in effect a direct threat to him. The one-tails belonged to the fourth Kazakage's son. The eight-tails belonged to the fourth Raikage's brother. The nine-tails had been the fourth Hokage's child. Even in Iwagakure, the two Jinchuriki were central fighting assets and primary deterrents. No village could afford to lose them. With the Akatsuki confirmed as targeting the tailed beasts, there was no room left for negotiation. The fourth Raikage leaned forward. Hokage, how did you rescue the nine tails? Did you defeat Akatsuki's A? The third Hokage gave a short account of the rescue operation, and then sighed. We managed to get the Jinchuriki back, but A escaped. Failure to capture any Akatsuki members meant the five nations still lacked crucial intelligence. The fourth Mizukage studied the other Kage, then looked down, calculating. It seems our hidden mist may have the advantage here. He had read Mei Terumi's full report. At the assessment site, they'd found only a mysterious samurai placed by the Akatsuki. Although Mei and Kisame had appeared during the operation, they found no other Akatsuki members, leaving open the possibility that Haku might have infiltrated the organization. The Grass Village representatives started to scheme as well. Although the first Grass Scouts sent to help Karen were killed, a later team did manage to link up with her. Karen's own account suggested the Akatsuki had been testing whether she could survive pursuit. Since she had, she might have passed their assessment and been taken into the organization. If so, the Grass Village could gain inside knowledge of Akatsuki operations. At the same time, Orochimaru, sitting quietly as the Odagakure delegate, smiled faintly. As a former Akatsuki member, he understood the organization better than most, and he could not suppress a certain smugness to see the five Kage so unsettled by Akatsuki intelligence. But Kabuto's latest report gave him pause. While the others debated Upper Moon 2, Orochimaru's thoughts turned to Upper Moon 1, the name that had never been publicly revealed and remained shrouded. He knew something others did not, that Upper Moon 1 had recently engaged in a major clash with Akatsuki's A and had been defeated. Listening to the third Hokage's account of the rescue, Orochimaru found himself puzzled. How could Akatsuki's A have traveled from the deserts of the Land of Wind to the snowfields of the Land of Lightning in only a few days? The question hung in his mind as the summit fell into a heavy, uncertain silence. Gradually, the conversation at the summit turned to the strange nature of Upper Moon 2. The fourth Kazakage asked, "Did you really see him devour corpses?" Zabuza, still wrapped in bandages, nodded. "Yes, he seems able to absorb chakra by eating corpses." Kakashi added, "I confirmed it with my Sharingan. Every time he devours a corpse, the chakra in his body spikes dramatically." A collective shiver ran through the hall. Many people literally recoiled. They were all shinobi, familiar with stealing or studying corpses, but eating them for chakra, just hearing about it, felt obscene. Someone in the room blurted, "Could this be some kind of secret technique?" "I've never heard of anything like that," another voice said. "Humph, it's probably a forbidden jutsu created by the Akatsuki," someone else sneered. "Yeah, those fanatics would try anything." The hall buzzed with speculation. The five Kaji exchanged glances and subtly shook their heads. None of their villages claimed knowledge of such a technique. Orochimaru, who represented the hidden sound, had been silent, thoughtful. At last he asked, "Does Upper Moon 2 truly possess an immortal body?" Kakashi faced Orochimaru. "We can't determine the exact method yet," he said, but Upper Moon 2 has an extraordinary regenerative ability. Even if his arm is severed, it regrows at a visible speed. A representative from Takigakure was immediately asked, "I heard your village has an immortality technique. Is Upper Moon 2 using your secret jutsu?" The Takigakure envoy quickly denied it. Upper Moon 2 has absolutely no relation to our village. Our technique, Earth Grudge Fear, was stolen by Kakuzu. Someone else pointed at Yugakure. "Isn't there an Akatsuki member named Hidan who's immortal?" "Yugakure, don't hide this. Explain." The Yugakure representative could only say, "We don't know how Hidan obtained his immortality. In any case, our village doesn't possess such a jutsu." "Do you expect us to believe that?" a voice scoffed. The discussion escalated into argument until the third Hokage intervened and quieted the room. Orochimaru had brought the topic up because of what he'd learned from the battles involving Kimimaro, Yakushi Kabuto, and Upper Moon 1. Upper Moon 1 had exhibited similarly terrifying regenerative powers. If multiple Upper Moons showed this trait, it was likely not unique to Upper Moon 2. It suggested that several, perhaps all, Upper Moon members in the Akatsuki possessed this kind of near immortality. Orochimaru's silence carried intention. That immortal body was exactly what he coveted. Konoha and the Hidden Mist were also reticent. Sasuke hadn't hidden anything when he returned to the village. He'd reported the fierce encounter between Akatsuki's A and Kyojuro Rengoku. Tsunade's team had submitted their report on the demon's battle to the Hokage's office. The third Hokage now realized that Upper Moon 2's immortality wasn't an isolated case, but part of a broader phenomenon. The Hidden Mists report, Mei Terumi's dossier on her and her companion's clash with Giyu Tomioka, had long been on the desk of the fourth Mizukage. Mei had even speculated that the samurai encountered on the island were likely the Akatsuki's experimental creations, and she added that these experimental beings might fear sunlight. Neither Konoha nor the Hidden Mist was willing to share those assessments freely. The third Hokage believed basic intelligence could be exchanged, but core secrets should be retained to preserve initiative at the Five Kage Summit. The fourth Mizukage was even more guarded. Haku was a spy he had planted in Konoha, and that identity could not be revealed. Haku's current status, being treated favorably by the Akatsuki and used as a pawn, made the Mizukage all the more reluctant to disclose anything that might compromise his asset. After a long, heated debate, the summit reached a consensus. The Akatsuki's strength far exceeded expectations, and all future actions concerning them had to be far more cautious. That same consensus effectively shelved the plan to immediately rescue the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, Yugito ni. The fourth Raikage had little to say. His rescue operation had not only failed, but endangered the entire allied forces. If the Akatsuki reinforced their attack, the consequences could be catastrophic. Reluctantly, he accepted that Yugito probably could not be rescued in the short term. Fortunately, Cloud Intelligence suggested Yugito was currently under Akatsuki A's genjutsu, not in immediate mortal peril. That at least left a possibility. When the meeting adjourned, the third Hokage summoned Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Kakashi, those who had participated in the allied operation, to his office. Puffing thoughtfully on his pipe, he tapped it with a ringed finger. "This is more complicated than we thought. What the Akatsuki have shown us so far is probably just the tip of the iceberg. If that's true, we must contact him as soon as possible," Jiraiya said. Tsunade frowned. "Is he reliable?" The third Hokage considered a moment, then spoke. "Itachi is still in the village." Everyone understood his implication. The him Jiraiya and Tsunade meant was Uchiha Itachi of the Akatsuki. With Sasuke still in the village as leverage, Itachi might still be dependable, for now. Kakashi spoke up suddenly. "Hokage-sama, I have a conjecture." They all turned to him. Kakashi chose his words carefully. "I think the Upper Moons and the Akatsuki may not be on the same side." The third Hokage was not surprised. "Explain." Kakashi outlined his reasoning. The mysterious samurai Sasuke encountered in the Land of Wind displayed the same abilities and fighting style as Upper Moon 2. After that samurai crossed paths with Akatsuki's A conflict broke out, much like the clashes between Akatsuki and Upper Moon 5 and Upper Moon 6. Based on those parallels, Kakashi continued, it seemed that the Upper Moons and the Akatsuki were not only unaligned, but might even be hostile toward each other. Second update. Please give recommendation votes and monthly votes. It's a small favor, everyone. Thank you. Shinji didn't bother asking about the 5 Kaji Summit. He didn't need to. Invite Karen out for a walk, and she would tell him everything she knew. When she explained that the 5 great shinobi countries now considered the upper moons to be members of the Akatsuki, Shinji could only stare for a moment. His butterfly effect had reshaped history. The Atsuki had become a stranger, darker, and more powerful organization than in the original timeline. The 5 great nations were close to turning pale at the mere mention of Akatsuki. On reflection, that wasn't entirely bad. Nagato thought he controlled the organization. Obito thought he controlled Nagato. Madara thought he controlled Obito. Like nesting dolls, they might squabble over details, but they were united on one thing: gathering the tailed beasts and resurrecting the 10 tails. The sooner the 5 great nations took the Akatsuki seriously, the greater the chance they would slow or block the resurrection. Shinji was only 8. He needed time to grow. He didn't want the Akatsuki to finish the 10 tails and trigger a 4th Shinobi World War before he was ready. After he'd got a rough picture of the ninja world's situation, Shinji turned back to his own affairs. The authority he'd gained let him actively summon the lamp and use it for spatial travel. He knew that ability was dangerous. One wrong jump could drop him into some hostile dimension or attract an overlord's notice. Prudence said to wait until he had the Rinnegan. Curiosity didn't agree. That night, he tried the lamp. The result was both disappointing and quietly reassuring. The lamp did not grant free interdimensional travel. It detected spatial rifts and could send him only through a rift it recognized. Rifts weren't common. He could spend a night trying and find nothing. Interdimensional travel, he realized, wasn't an easy door to kick open. Every dimension was a fortress as well as a treasure. No wonder only the lantern bearers from the Demon Slayer world had invaded the ninja world, and why lantern bearers from other worlds hadn't. Since he couldn't reliably detect rifts, he shelved the idea for now and returned to the one thing he could control, increasing his own strength. The next morning, he went to the medical team's laboratory. The United Forces and rescue squads had taken heavy losses this time. The Konoha medical team was frantic. Shinji wasn't an official member, and being a sensitive Uchiha survivor, he wasn't sent to treat the wounded from other villages. Ostensibly because of suspicion, more practically because of caution, the village left him alone, which made him the most leisurely person in a very busy department. He flipped through experiment logs and planned his next moves. The operation to sever the anchor points had required everything he could muster and had drawn intense scrutiny on everyone involved. Naruto's near kidnapping made him a top protection target, and Sasuke, as a witness, was under heavy observation too. Karen, who Shinji had taken into his inner circle and who had been present during the attack on Naruto, could not escape investigation. The grass village behind her still hoped she might infiltrate the Akatsuki, and they watched her secretly. A few days earlier, Shinji had swapped Karen's eyes back to her own and put the plan to restore her all-lost Mangekyo Sharingan on hold. Sai faced similar attention from his own village. The hidden mist watched him so closely, even his sparring felt observed. Kimimaro, also in Shinji's inner circle and a remnant of the hidden mist's corpse bone pulse, found himself scrutinized as well. Neiji's situation was marginally better, but since Shinji had informed the Hyuga clan of the operation, Hiyashi's men kept him under surveillance around the clock. Everyone was under investigation or being shadowed. Shinji himself could feel eyes on him. That meant both the all-loss Mangekyo recovery plan centered on Karen and the Kimimaro Neji cell fusion plan aimed at the Tenseigan were stalled. How long they'd be paused he couldn't say, and he couldn't afford to waste the delay. He set several small nutrient tanks on the table and rested his chin on his hand. 3 tanks sat before him, each holding nothing but a pair of eyes. From left to right, the Mangekyo Sharingan infused with Susanoo, the all-loss Mangekyo Sharingan, and a high-purity pair of Byakugan taken from an Otsutsuki branch family. His fingers tapped the tabletop. The pause in Karen's plan meant the reincarnation eye plan was frozen. The halt to the Kimimaro Neji project meant the Tenseigan plan was on ice. Time, for him, was the life of the ninja world. He couldn't simply wait. Rinnegan. He thought about it again. He already had a pair of Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and his yin release had improved in quality. He felt his Eternal Mangekyo was approaching the conditions needed to trigger the Rinnegan. If he used the Susanoo lamp to control another pair of eyes, maybe his Eternal Mangekyo would finally meet the threshold. His gaze lingered on the tank with the Byakugan. Until now, the lamp had only controlled Sharingan, so he hadn't fully understood its nature. It was only after he used it on that pair of high-purity Byakugan that he discovered a secret of the Susanoo lamp.